This discussion between Amritlal and Ratna, we are going back to again first section to talk about this idea of reform itself and nation, and how the nationalist project is has a complex relationship with gender, and we saw this discussion happening in Rajmohan's Wife in a very different way. Here Dattani's critique is very different from Rajmohan's Wife, and for that matter from Bankim. Here he seems to be pointing, as I said, that the nationalist project seems to be very masculine and bereft of an understanding of the fluidity of gender, and also it has a very reductive, narrow vision of what consists and should constitute our heritage. And then the discussion on the Devdasis is actually very pertinent here, and then Amritlal seems to be lacking in his narrow-minded liberal vision, as it is called, and you can see the project itself, nationalist project, being carried out on women's bodies. Says times have changed. When we were newly married, Jai's mother and I were not allowed to go anywhere on our own, especially not to see the moving pictures. But we were allowed to go to the temple. So whenever we wanted to see the moving picture, we would tell everyone at home that we are going to the temple. Nobody stopped us. If I wanted to see a film, I will tell you the truth. That's what Ratna says. So you can see a generational gap itself, that Amritlal had to, and his wife had to, recourse to certain kind of practices that Ratna and Jai don't have to, because they think it's much better to be upfront and face the truth. And this is because, you know, I won't object to your seeing a film. I would tell you anyway. That's what Ratna says, highlighting the gap that is there. What if it wasn't a film you wanted to see? What if it were to some other place elsewhere? You know, I wouldn't want you to go. Where would that be? You know very well where, because that's where you go every Monday. It was fortunate for me that it was Patel who saw you going there. I can trust him to keep his mouth shut. He called me out of concern for our family name. As I said, you can see the same battles again about gender in very different ways being fought over women's bodies, right? So still the daughter or the daughter-in-law being the repository of the family's honor, right? That where is your daughter-in-law going has a certain currency in terms of your family's name. So that's why, out of concern, Patel saw it, and I can trust him that he will not talk about this thing. I haven't done anything to spoil the family name. So you understand that even if time has passed, our concerns about gender almost have remained the same, where the women's names are tied to the family's honor itself. It's a very old patriarchal construction and a concern itself, which has constituted families, nations in the same way. But people assume the worst. Well, you can start by reforming such people instead of me. Don't preach to me. I know what I have to do. So then Ratna goes on, and it's quite a long dialogue, and it's worthwhile to read it entirely, because it highlights some of those concerns that we are invested in. I have always been taught to speak to my elders with respect, but since I have not done anything wrong, there is no reason why I shouldn't speak up. Chenni Amma is the oldest living exponent of the Mysore school and is the only link we have with the old school. And here you can see a very different idea of nationalism that is emerging out, that we want to preserve our heritage, what we call as Indian. Whereas Amritlal seems to be only focused on the sanitized version of what can be called Indian. It's a very very reductive, very different, very narrow vision of it. And here, and you see that in those ways, how he's not a nationalist, that he's ready to destroy whatever learnings that Chenyama might have to offer, or the guru who might have to offer. He is ready to destroy that. He, in that way, his nationalism is under the scanner, is what Dattani seems to hint at. So she says that she is the only exponent of living exponent of Mysore school, and is the only link we have the old school. She doesn't have a single student who is dedicated enough to absorb her knowledge. She is 75 and dying. There is nobody even to visit her, not even her relatives or her children. Oh, she does get the occasional journalist or a curious foreigner knocking at her door, but they don't do much for her except maybe give her a few annas and out of pity. But she doesn't mind all this. She doesn't mind at all being poor and lowly. What she is really frustrated about, that in her youth she did not have the freedom to express her art. All her childhood years were spent in training which she could never use, all a waste for her. She spends her time now at the temple steps selling flowers. When she came to know that I was a dancer, she greeted me and pleaded, yes, pleaded with me to learn the art of Abhinaya from her. She was tempted, she even tempted me by offering to teach me some old dance compositions which she knew by memory. So it was important for her that she should impart her knowledge to someone worthy of it, and it was important for me to learn what she had to offer. So instead of going to the temple every Monday, I go to her house and practice. So you can see a very again a very nationalist impulse in Ratna, and then that's commendable and worthwhile to think about, that what they are doing, they are not looking at it from the gender lens, that whether it's a man or a woman who is doing or whose job it is to do. They are interested in preserving the knowledge itself, that it should pass down. And then that's what she is talking about, that the nation probably did not really care for her when she was actually an upholder of this nation's knowledge, a heritage and ancient knowledge that she can have. What Amritlal and so-called nationalists and so-called keepers of heritage are only interested is that, like, oh, their daughter-in-law is practicing in a courtyard where people can see. So again, coming back to the idea of honor. So those narrow ideals seem to contradict their claim to be progressive. Only those who are curious enough to peep over her wall should see the sound of dancing bells coming from. So what she also highlights is that Ratna in her this thing, that like if people are seeing, they must be peeping over her wall, right? That makes them kind of a pervert, right? A creepy like passerby. Why are they interested in what is happening inside, right? So that also again brings out the problematic aspect of the kind of masculinity that Amritlal seems to be championing. So and the sound of bells coming from a courtyard of a prostitute is what he says. She is 75 years old is what Ratna tries to tell him, that yes, this is horrible in the sense, the reductive view that you are taking, that a 75-year-old woman who is constantly being called a prostitute, someone who is in flesh trade. Ratna tells him that she sells flowers on the steps of the temple. That's not enough for him. And Amritlal is only worried about the social responsibility and the gaze of society in that sense, which Ratna is already called perverse, and says that, like, what was I doing? I was not doing anything wrong. And she says that dancing the divine dance of Shiva and Parvati, and that should not be any problem to the society itself, because what I'm doing is partly religious and partly preservation of these religious traditions, the temple traditions, don't think of as public exhibitions, right? So, you can see constantly a clash happening between this restricted ideas and also how manipulative these ideas of nationalism that are proffered by Amritlal are and how patriarchal they are. So, it is a question that is being asked from Ratna and Jairaj's side, that you look at how you think of women and what is the role of women in constituting this country of ours, in this post-colonial reality called India. What is the role of women there? What is the role of ancient practices, cultures? Are we supposed to preserve them, and in what ways are we supposed to preserve them? And you see that constantly this kind of a societal pressure seems to be coming up on women again and again. Their bodies, everything seems to be centered on women themselves. So, if we look at, for example, towards the end, when Vishwas talks about Lata's dance, we also see similar kind of accusations. So, if we look at it, if we let's reach page 62, he says that he saw the dance and he didn't know what to say, and Jairaj says, "Speak up, son, what was it that you didn't like?" He says it was too erotic after seeing Lata's dance, and this dance has got rave reviews by dance experts, and the president liked it, got a standing ovation. But Vishwas, a narrow-minded again person like probably Amrit Lal, thinks it was too erotic. Jairaj says, my wife danced the same number 30 years ago. So, thereby also pointing to the fact that nothing has changed in 30 years. Amritlal was against dancing as a public thing, but also it tells that like Vishwas being third generation seems much closer to Amritlal in his views. But then there Amritlal was explicitly against Jairaj dancing. Here it seems a bit more strange that Vishwas, who initially did not have a problem with Lata dancing, seems to hint that there was a problem. There is a problem. I admire her courage. So you should feel it. So you feel it shouldn't be done. I really can't say because he is now being pushed to answer, and the family is filled with dancers. I don't know how much to I don't know much about these things, but you think you know enough to pass judgment. I'm not passing judgment. I simply gave my opinion. I'm glad you have an opinion. You're welcome to it for whatever it's worth. Look, I know I'm not very knowledgeable on the subject. I merely said because it was Lata who was dancing that, oh, yeah, because it's my wife who, again, I'm supposed to have whatever rights or something. So, Lata who was dancing, if it is my family member, then there is a problem. That the kind of problem that Amritlal had with Ratna. Finish what we are saying. So, now we are getting closer to your opinion. You don't want Lata dancing erotic numbers. Daddy, you make it sound so crude. Erotic numbers. There is nothing crude about it. I danced the same item as I was telling you about earlier. For the army, a friend of ours arranged for a program and the money was good. So, your mother was too scared and they only wanted a woman. So, I wore your mother's costume and a wig and whatever else was necessary to make me look like a woman and danced. They loved it. They loved it even more when they found out that I was a man. Of course, knowing the army, they may not be very surprised. What do you say about that? I admire your courage. Look, I don't mean to object to her dancing. It is her passion and wouldn't be fair for me to probably stop her from dancing. All I am saying is that, what I am saying and he's hedging here because he knows he has to be diplomatic. Yes, that it really isn't necessary to make it so erotic. So you can present a sanitized version, the kind of version that was envisioned by, let's say, Amrit Lal. At least I don't think so. Of course, you may think so, but I don't know what she thinks about. So it was choreographed by Daddy 30 years ago for Mummy. They won critical acclaims abroad for pieces like the Ashtapadi. I fail to see why I can't perform the same piece today. Even after 30 years, Lata seems to be like exasperated that like nothing has changed. Uh, yes, of course, if that is what you want to, nobody's stopping you. In the very patronizing voice that you can hear here, that like nobody is stopping you. So you can go on like doing whatever you want. Lucky for her, in the old days, and Jairaj is mocking here, but he is also repeating a statement by Amrit Lal, as we just saw, where Amrit Lal was talking about, in the old days your mother and I could not go out, in that sense. Do you want to stop me? You can't, but do you want to? That's what Lata asks to Vishwas. You remember what you told me in this very room, one right away and another let us see. Yes. Does that still hold good? Yes. So he's talking about them having children, and Lata had in the earlier, when we meet them first, they were discussing about having children, and all those. Lata said we can have one immediately, and then another one we'll see in time. And as you see, he is pushed to the corner. He seems to be highlighting about that idea, that domestic, this world of the women, that what are women supposed to do in that sense, that like, shouldn't you think about a child once we get married? Immediately one should happen. So how do you go on dancing? Or probably if you do these erotic numbers, what kind of impression it will make on the child itself? So you can see those questions, vexed questions, coming back again and again in different forms for the women in that sense. And this project of having ideal family or very clear-cut rules of gender seems to be problematized here, thanks to the idea of dance itself. One last bit that we will focus on here is something very interesting. If you look at all these discourses, the discourses surround Jairaj and Ratna, and very interestingly, Ratna comes across as a very interesting character here. Why? Because she is thought of as as the person who seems to be a villain by both Amrit Lal, also Jairaj, because Jairaj, as we saw, had very nasty things to say, and she colluded. We realized that she colluded with them. But so Amrit Lal is also dissatisfied with her. Jairaj is also dissatisfied with her. We see Vishwas, when he comes in, also make a remark that, is your mother the domineering one? The domineering one, is she the one who runs the house in that sense? So in all these accusations, you will see Amrit Lal accusing the same way, and Vishwas also accusing in the same way, that the wife holds power. As we saw that, like Amrit Lal asking Jairaj that this is why you are doing it at the behest of your wife. You will see similar concerns being articulated by Vishwas. Jairaj, when he talks about their life and he's drunk, he discusses how his wife kind of distanced him from his dance, talks to her in a way that is very patriarchal. Very interestingly, Jairaj comes throughout the play as someone who subverts the image of the ideal man, who's subverting those gender binaries. He's dancing, he's growing his hair, he refuses to toe his father's advices, but he doesn't earn, so he has to go back and everything, right? So, but he's constantly subverting those roles. If you also see his interactions with Vishwas and Lata, they're not like what the interaction between Amrit Lal and Jairaj was. So Jairaj comes across as a very soft, progressive, broad vision man. But when it comes to interactions with Ratna at the end, we see that he turns into a very patriarchal man, almost mouthing abuses that you will not probably expect from a character like Jairaj, but which also exposes how masculine the world is. Even though people who are subverting those ideals at their level, their interactions with the other gender reveals a lot of those anxieties regarding gender. So he says that like and this is a retrospective scene in the past. These both of them, Jairaj and Ratna, have come back from a performance, and he's drunk, and they have a son at this point of time called Shankar, and this is before Lata is born, and they both have come back, and Jairaj obviously is frustrated because his wife seems to be the person who everyone knows and is the better dancer, and Jairaj is no more dancing at this point of time, and he's drunk. So Ratna says, I am going to sleep with the baby, you don't come up here, and Jairaj says, don't bother coming, Ratna says, don't bother coming up. Jairaj, admiring Ratna's costume, what a beauty you are. Is that why you like to dance? To have men admire your assets? Very filthy and very misogynistic towards her. Ratna doesn't take any of this, says, why do you dance? But I don't dance, I am not good enough. How can you be when you are drunk half of the time? And then he goes on to elaborate how she colluded with this, with Amrit Lal to colluded with Amrit Lal to deny him opportunities and everything. And then he says, these are all your faults, you go on drowning, and there's a fight that ensues between them, that like, whose fault is that? Ratna says, you go on drowning yourself in country liquor and ask me whose fault it is. So whose fault is that? Only to get invitation to dance, surely not mine. For one full year, I refused to dance, turning down offers because I didn't want to dance alone. I did such a sacrifice. But yeah, Jairaj says, I want you to give me my self-esteem. When did I take it over? Jairaj exposes Ratna. But then look at how Jairaj critiques Ratna. The idiom is very patriarchal, as I showed a previous example. A young beautiful woman, yes, a young beautiful woman, and you are jealous of me for that. What kind of a man you are? And you are so clever, no wonder you get along well with him. My father, I don't know what you, don't pretend my hands, I am not blind or anything. I am truly jealous of you. You are quite a looker, quite a dancer, quite an actress. One is to hand it to you. You have the style, not to mention the brains, and you have destroyed me first, and you blamed me on make myself useful as a stage prop, then use regret and expect me to shrug my shoulders, resign myself. Thank you very much for the talk. Good night. It's time to feed the baby. And then Ratna says, what are you saying? And you don't do anything, and you are just blaming it on me. So what we see is, in some ways, obviously Ratna manipulated Jairaj, but Jairaj also refusing to take responsibility on his own. And something really interesting happens, that that he knows, because he knows that what is happening in his household. He says, when Ratna says that I'll go feed the baby, I don't have time for all this, his barbs are all colored in misogyny. That she should have been home. She should have paid attention to her domestic duties instead of going on giving performances. The jealousy, envy in Jairaj speaking all about it. But you can't, that's why he says, you can't convince me that you are playing the part of the devoted mother very well. You won't know even where to start. So, in that sense, Jairaj is complaining about she preferring her work to her domestic duties. And in a way, this kind of a binary has plagued women who are in public duties work and compared to women who are homemakers, in that sense that women, what should women do? Should they have a binary choice itself, that they either prioritize work or they prioritize domestic sphere? And that's what is disappointing in that sense, to see from Jairaj the way that he kind of presents it to Ratna, that you have not done this, you have focused on that only. And Ratna's this thing is, you knew all this, you could have helped at home, you have not done it. And we see that because of that, what happens, because he says that like feeding the baby, that won't be necessary, he's fast asleep, he won't miss his meal. How do you know? He usually wakes up at this hour, not on the nights you perform. What do you mean? The ayah. Go on, you wouldn't know, an old trick banded down from one generation of ayahs to the next. I know, I was raised by one. Opium? That like the ayah gives in slight quantities opium to the children so that they don't wake up and make demands on her. Effective, isn't it? He hasn't cried at all. Don't worry, they always give it the right amount. She too? Yes, she too. She wants a restful sleep on the kitchen floor, same as her mother and her mother's mother. She too has given Shankar. What do you mean? What did you say? She too has given Shankar? What did you say? She too has given Shankar? They realize that probably has been given opium and the child, the dosage may not have been proper, and probably they lost the child. We don't hear of Shankar at all. So, in that sense, if Jairaj knew that this is what was happening at home with the ayah, why didn't he stop her? Or why didn't he intervene? Why did he wait for it as an opportunity to take a pot shot at Ratna? Why does it become Ratna's mistake that she did not pay attention to the child? It was also similarly Jairaj's role, right? So in this entire sequence, what we understand is that Jairaj also becomes somewhere closer, and that's why the younger Jairaj seems closer to Vishwas, the older Jairaj seems closer to Amritlal, because in all of them they hold a very patriarchal view. Maybe the difference in degree is there, but they all seem to hold a very patriarchal view of women and what they should be doing, they should not be doing, in that sense. So you see the play bringing out these complex articulations when we see the gender realities being questioned, being probed, being interrogated, and Dattani through these explorations brings out a very Indian reality, and we are constantly questioning and thinking about the Indian reality here through his dramatic explorations. And then this play, that's why, becomes a very unique site to think about post-coloniality, the newly formed nation, whose nation is it, what kind of color it is taking, and Dattani's dissatisfaction with the kind of narrow, rigid ideals that the nation seems to be adhering to. And he calls for a broader, more progressive politics and a critique of the contemporary society's gendered ideals itself.